On a crisp spring morning, Reed Mather found a $750 fine taped to his mailbox for storing his boat on community property. The problem? The boat was tied to a dock his grandfather built, on a lake Reed legally owned. What the HOA didn't know was about to flip their world upside down. Reed Mather rose before dawn, as he always did. The morning fog still curled over the surface of Eagle's Mirror Lake, soft and silver, like a ghost from the past. He stood at the edge of the dock he'd rebuilt with his own hands, breathing in the scent of pine and fresh water. The only sounds were the distant cry of loons and the faint creak of his wooden rowboat rocking gently on the water. This was his sanctuary, a piece of land handed down from his grandfather, carved out of forest and solitude. It wasn't just home, it was legacy. He sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, across the lake, the sleek rooftops of the new Creststone Waters development glinted through the mist. He had watched that gated community grow like a weed, artificial and fast, with HOA signs appearing as quickly as the luxury homes. Reed never gave them much thought. As far as he knew, their reach didn't extend beyond their stone archways. But that morning everything changed. By the time the fog lifted, Reed found a crisp, glossy envelope tucked into the handle of his front gate. The return address read, Creststone Waters Homeowners Association. Frowning, he peeled it open. It was a formal notice of violation. Reed read it once, then twice, his brows furrowing deeper with each line. Notice of fine, $750 for unauthorized docking and storage of marine vessel on Creststone Waters community-controlled shoreline. He let out a short breath, stunned. His boat, an old beautifully maintained vessel named Blue Jay, was docked behind his house, on a shoreline his family had owned since 1889. There had never been any question of it. His grandfather had built the original dock with hand-cut lumber, and Reed had reinforced it with his son Miles just 2 summers ago. He looked toward the boat now, still tied neatly to the piling. The dock extended into the calm water like a handshake between generations. Nothing about it had changed. So how could this be a violation? Reed turned the page over. There it was, signed in bold script by someone named Vanessa Lockridge, president of the Creststone HOA. It warned of escalating penalties and further enforcement if the boat wasn't removed within 7 days. He set the letter down on the kitchen table, the wood creaking beneath his weight as he sat. Miles entered the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Dad, what's wrong?" Reed gave him a faint smile. "We've got a problem." Miles picked up the letter, his brow scrunching as he read. "But this is our land. They can't do this." Reed nodded slowly, but something gnawed at him. "Unless they think they can." There had been rumors, quiet ones, about the HOA extending their reach beyond their official boundaries. Stories about neighbors being harassed, fined, pressured to sell. Reed hadn't paid them much mind, until now. He stepped back outside and stared out at the lake again, the sun now glinting off the water. The morning peace had been shattered, not by storm or wind, but by a single sheet of paper and the threat of something deeper. He didn't know it yet, but this was no clerical error. It was a warning shot. And the HOA had just picked a fight with the one man in town who held the oldest deed to the land they so desperately wanted to control. 3 days after receiving the fine, Reed heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside his house. He stepped onto the porch with a towel in his hand, still drying off after a quick repair dive under the dock. A sleek black SUV pulled up, spotless and humming softly like an expensive threat. The doors opened in perfect coordination, and out stepped 3 people dressed like they were headed to a corporate board meeting rather than a lakeside property. Leading them was a tall, angular woman in a perfectly tailored navy suit and expensive heels that sank slightly into the dirt. Her hair was an icy platinum, and her lipstick was sharp enough to draw blood. She carried a leather portfolio in one hand and authority in the other. "Mr. Mather?" she said, not asking. "That's me," Reed said evenly, towel still in hand. "I'm Vanessa Lockridge, president of the Creststone Waters HOA. These are board members Harrison Bell and Evelyn Grant. The two behind her nodded with stiff smiles that looked more like rehearsed grimaces. Reed didn't extend a hand. "Can I help you?" Vanessa opened her portfolio without invitation and pulled out a printed version of the violation letter he'd already received. "We're here to follow up on your non-compliance. As stated, your vessel is in violation of our shoreline usage policy. Failure to relocate it will result in daily fines." Reed gave a slow blink. "I live here. This is my land. That dock's been in my family since before Creststone was even a line on a blueprint." Vanessa didn't flinch. "Your property lies adjacent to Creststone Waters. According to our updated jurisdictional maps, the shoreline falls within the regulated zone of our community standards. As such, the lakefront, including your dock, is considered part of our controlled perimeter." Reed stepped down from the porch. "That's not how land rights work. This isn't a town road or a shared sidewalk. This is my shoreline, my dock. And that lake, my grandfather owned it." Vanessa pulled another paper from her folder and offered it with the air of someone presenting a gift she already knew would be refused. "This is a certified survey map from 2016, adopted under Creststone's Phase 3 expansion. It shows revised boundaries, including the surrounding lakefront and adjacent easements." Reed didn't take the paper. "Let me guess. Your team drew those lines yourselves." Vanessa smiled thinly. "With professional surveyors?" Reed crossed his arms. "Did you notify the county when you redrew their map?" She didn't answer. Harrison, the taller of the two board members, cleared his throat and chimed in. "We'd like to avoid legal confrontation, Mr. Mather. If you remove your boat and dock voluntarily, we're willing to waive the accumulated fines." Reed raised his brows. "You're offering me a deal to stop using my own property." Vanessa tilted her head. "We're offering a compromise to keep things civil." Reed chuckled darkly. "You think because I don't have a fancy gate or a manicured lawn, I'll just roll over? I've lived here longer than your subdivision has existed. You don't scare me." The wind stirred the surface of the lake behind him. Vanessa's face remained unmoved, but her voice lost a shade of its pretense. "This is your formal warning, Mr. Mather. The next step involves legal enforcement, and you will not win." Reed took a step closer, voice low but firm. "I don't need to win something I already own." Without another word, Vanessa snapped her folder shut. The board members turned, and the SUV doors opened automatically. Reed watched them leave without blinking. As the car disappeared down the long gravel road, Miles stepped out of the house, eyes wide. "They really think they can take the lake?" Reed looked down at his son, jaw tight. "They think I won't fight for it." He paused, glancing toward the old wooden shed beside the dock, where his grandfather's files, maps, and handwritten documents sat untouched for decades. "But they're about to learn just how wrong they are." The harassment didn't stop. If anything, it escalated. 2 days after the confrontation, a notice was pinned to Reed's front gate with a thick red seal. It declared his dock a public safety hazard and ordered immediate removal of all non-compliant infrastructure within the HOA jurisdiction. The letter was written in cold legalese, but its message was clear. They were trying to erase him. Reed read it silently, then folded it and slid it into the kitchen drawer, right on top of the previous fine. He didn't speak of it to Miles. He didn't need to. That night, drones buzzed over their house again. Reed turned off every light and stood in the dark with a pair of binoculars, watching red lights blink against the stars. The next morning, a pile of dead fish was left at the edge of their dock. Someone was sending a message. Then came the worst of it. Reed had taken Blue Jay out for a short ride across the cove. Nothing extravagant, just a calm glide through morning mist. When he returned, he found the dock ropes slashed clean through. His boat was drifting, slow and aimless, toward the far reeds, where it could have easily struck sharp rocks. Reed dove in without hesitation, swam hard, and managed to pull the boat back just in time. Waterlogged and shivering, He tied it back himself. His hands scraped and his breath ragged. Miles ran down the hill as fast as he could, eyes wide with panic. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Reed said, chest heaving. "But this isn't just fines anymore. It's sabotage." They called the sheriff. Deputy Carlson came out an hour later, slow-moving and disinterested. He scratched his head as Reed explained everything, about the fines, the drone, the dock rope. "Well," Carlson said, adjusting his sunglasses, "if there's no camera footage, there's not much we can do. Docks wear out. Ropes fray." "Ropes don't fray in a straight line," Reed snapped. Carlson shrugged. "It's a civil matter, really, between you and the HOA." Reed narrowed his eyes. "You live in Crestone, don't you?" The deputy froze. Then he gave a tight-lipped nod. "I do." He got back in his cruiser and drove away, tires spitting gravel. Reed stood in silence for a long time, then turned toward the old tool shed. He hadn't been inside it in years. His grandfather's things were still there, untouched, gathering dust in that wooden vault of memory and law. He opened the door. The air was thick with age and the scent of pine oil. He found the old iron-bound trunk beneath a sheet of tarp and lifted the lid. Inside were files wrapped in faded linen, a rusted lock box with old survey maps, and, carefully rolled in a metal tube, the original land patent. Issued in 1889 under federal registry, signed and notarized, stating in exact coordinates that the lake, its bed, and its surrounding banks belonged solely to Elias Mather, Reed's grandfather. He sat on the floor of the shed, stunned. It wasn't just a deed. It was a land patent, the highest form of property title. It superseded all future claims, and it hadn't been touched, contested, or transferred. His grandfather had kept it safe all those years for a reason. Reed traced his finger over the embossed seal. Then he found the map, drawn by hand, marked in ink, showing every inlet and shoreline. His shoreline, his lake, his legacy. He stayed there until sunset, the amber light flickering through gaps in the wooden walls. When he finally stood, something had shifted in him. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was ready. Later that night, over dinner, he showed the documents to Miles, who stared at them with disbelief. "This means everything they said, every fine, every threat. It's all fake." Reed nodded. "They've been pretending to own something that's legally ours. They just never expected someone to stand up." Miles grinned faintly. "So what now?" Reed smiled back. But this time, it wasn't the tired, cautious smile of a man trying to keep the peace. It was something sharper. "Now, son," he said, "we remind them who the lake really belongs to." The next morning, Reed drove into town with the land patent sealed safely in a protective folder. He didn't go to the county office. Not yet. First, he walked through the glass doors of a law firm he hadn't stepped foot in since the funeral of his wife. Whitaker and Lorne, etched in gold lettering above the door. Inside, the waiting room was empty, and the soft sound of classical music drifted through the air. A secretary looked up, startled. "Can I help you, sir?" "I need to speak with May Whitaker," Reed said. "Do you have an appointment?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out the folder, carefully slid it across the desk, and opened it just enough to reveal the embossed federal seal on the land patent. The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Please wait one moment." 10 minutes later, May Whitaker appeared in the doorway. She looked like she hadn't aged a day. Sharp suit, black-framed glasses, and a no-nonsense confidence that filled the room before she even spoke. "Reed Mather," she said, folding her arms. "It's been a long time." Too long," he replied. "And I'm about to drag someone through hell." May glanced at the seal and motioned him into her office without another word. They sat, and Reed unfolded the entire story: the fines, the drones, the rope cutting, the sheriff brushing him off, and finally, the land patent. May examined the document for several minutes in silence, her brow furrowing deeper with every line. "Reed," she said finally, her voice low, "this isn't just a deed. This is a federal land patent. It's bulletproof." "That's what I thought." "You own the lake, not just the dock, the entire lake." Reed nodded. "And they've been charging people access fees, claiming it's community-owned." May leaned back in her chair, her mind already 5 steps ahead. That's fraud on a massive scale. She stood abruptly and began pacing. Do you know how many lawsuits I could file? You've got injunctive rights, quiet title options, class action counterclaims, and if we prove intent to deceive, that's criminal. Reed leaned forward. I don't just want them to stop. I want them exposed. May stopped pacing. Then we file an injunction immediately to freeze all enforcement activity from Creststone, and we submit your land patent to the county clerk to register it publicly, so that every resident who was misled knows they've been lied to. And after that, Reed asked. She smiled. Then we hit them where it hurts. We make them pay every cent they stole from every homeowner who was promised lake rights they never had. By noon, the paperwork was in motion. The following week, large signs appeared around the edge of the lake, posted on reinforced stakes. Private property, federally patented land. No fishing, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Vanessa Lockridge exploded the moment she saw them. She stormed into the county office demanding the signs be removed. But the clerk calmly pointed to the registered land patent, now on public record. It bore Reed's name and the original survey number. She was no longer dealing with a quiet boat mechanic. She was dealing with a man backed by federal title, legal firepower, and a growing list of angry Creststone residents demanding answers. Reed, for his part, stayed out of sight the next few days, letting the signs and the truth do the talking. But every evening he stood on his dock with Miles, watching the sun sink low over the water, knowing that for the first time in a long while, justice was rippling across the lake like a silent tide, and that tide was only beginning to rise. It started with one resident, then 3, then dozens. Reed sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee as the news spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with posts from homeowners in Creststone waters who had received HOA documents promising full lake access, private boating privileges, and exclusive shoreline rights. Some uploaded PDFs. Others shared screenshots. They had all been paying hundreds, some thousands over the years in lake maintenance fees and shoreline use permits, unaware that the HOA didn't actually own the lake. The headline on the local community board read, "Did Creststone sell you a lie?" Vanessa Lockridge tried to control the damage. She sent out urgent newsletters to all HOA members claiming Reed's land patent was outdated and under dispute. She framed Reed as a disgruntled landowner exploiting loopholes. But May was ready. She released an official statement, backed by the county clerk's office, attaching the scanned land patent and registration number, and publicly confirming that Reed Mather was the sole legal owner of Eagles Mirror Lake and its shores. The county even issued a cease and desist order to the HOA, banning them from issuing further fines or collecting lake-related fees. That's when the lawsuits began. A group of 15 homeowners filed the first class action case against the Creststone HOA for fraud and misrepresentation. Others followed. By the end of the week, more than 40 separate legal actions had been filed. Vanessa was named personally in several of them. May and Reed watched it unfold from her office, the lawsuit papers piling up faster than she could read them. "She's drowning," May said, tapping one of the folders, "and she deserves every bit of it." Reed wasn't smiling. He stared out the office window, watching the street below. "She still thinks I'm trying to hurt her." "I'm not." May looked over her glasses. "You're not. You're just refusing to be erased." But not everyone hated him. People from the town, not just Creststone, began reaching out. Older residents who remembered Elias Mather, teachers, fishermen. A local veterans group offered to help maintain the property. One retired environmental scientist volunteered to test the water and set up a wildlife conservation program. Reed began to realize that the lake didn't just belong to him. It mattered to others, too. He began drafting a plan, not for revenge, for renewal. That night, he sat with Miles on the back porch. "They called me a thief today at the gas station," Miles said quietly. Reed's heart clenched. "I'm sorry." I'm not, Miles replied. I told them I'd rather be a thief than someone who pays to lie to themselves. Reed looked at his son, taller now, stronger, shaped by this storm, and felt something unexpected, pride. We're not thieves, Reed said. We're guardians, and tomorrow we start treating the lake that way. The next day, Reed announced the formation of the Eagles Mirror Conservancy, a non-profit land trust to protect the lake, preserve its ecosystem, and ensure public access for future generations. Entry would be free. No profit, no gate, no tricks. Just respect for the land and the people who cared for it. Volunteers showed up within hours. Some brought tools, others brought food. They helped build small benches, picked up trash, and planted new trees near the shore. By evening, a group of children stood on the new pier watching the water, their laughter echoing like a long-lost song returning to its source. Reed watched them in silence. The lake was his, but now it was everyone's. Everyone who believed in truth, in fairness, and in standing your ground even when you're outnumbered. Vanessa Lockridge did not go down quietly. Within 48 hours of the lawsuits being filed, she held a crisis meeting with the remaining Creststone board members. She stood at the front of the lavish HOA community center, her manicured nails tapping the edge of the podium, her voice sharp and unwavering. This is a strategic misunderstanding, she told the dozens of residents seated in folding chairs. The land patent is being contested. Our legal team is working to reverse the registration and prove fraud on Mr. Mather's part. The lake is ours by principle, even if not by paper. But it was a weak performance. No one clapped. No one nodded. By now, everyone had seen the documents. May Whitaker had been interviewed on the evening news. The county assessor confirmed the legitimacy of the land patent in writing. And angry residents, especially those who had paid HOA lake fees for years, were demanding answers. 2 days later, Creststone's lawyer quietly withdrew from representing the HOA. May was 2 steps ahead. She filed an updated claim on Reed's behalf, seeking damages for trespass, emotional distress, and illegal fines. But the real blow came when she filed a motion for financial restitution to every homeowner who had paid lake-related dues. If we win this, May told Reed, Creststone's HOA will be forced into financial receivership. They'll have to either dissolve or place their entire operation under court supervision. Reed didn't celebrate. He didn't need to. The truth was finally louder than the lies. But the retaliation hadn't fully stopped. One night, just after midnight, Reed was awoken by a strange sound. He rose quickly, barefoot, and stepped outside with a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on 2 silhouettes running back toward a waiting car. They had spray-painted "Imposter" in red across his dockboards. Reed stood there in the cold, jaw clenched, heart pounding. Not with fear, but with disbelief. They were still trying. The next morning he didn't clean the graffiti. Instead, he took a photo and posted it to his new Eagles Mirror Conservancy page. They painted the word "imposter" on a dock my grandfather built with his bare hands. I could remove it, but I won't, because it proves something deeper. When you speak the truth, the only thing they have left is paint. It went viral. Within hours, thousands of people were sharing the post. Messages of support flooded in, from legal experts, environmental groups, even people from other states fighting similar HOA corruption. Then something unexpected happened. A woman named Sarah Delgado, a former employee of the Creststone HOA, came forward. She sent May a series of internal emails and audio recordings, proof that Vanessa had known all along about the lake's true ownership. She had deliberately buried the information and moved forward with collecting fees anyway. There were also documents showing she had forged parts of the 2016 map presented to Reed. It was the nail in the coffin. May presented the evidence to the district attorney. Within 72 hours, Vanessa Lockridge was arrested and charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud the public. She was led away from her sprawling Creststone house in handcuffs, her pristine image crumbling under the weight of her own deceit. The town watched as the woman who had tried to bully a quiet widower was now being paraded in front of flashing cameras and reporters. When Reed heard the news, he didn't speak for a long time. He simply walked down to the dock, still bearing the word imposter, sat on the edge, and dipped his hand into the water. Miles joined him quietly. "She's gone," Miles said. "For real this time." Reed nodded. Justice finally caught up. But he knew it wasn't just about Vanessa. It was about every quiet person who had been steamrolled by power. Every honest family who had been lied to by those hiding behind gates and signatures. That night, under a sky full of stars, the lake was calm again. And this time no drones buzzed overhead. No one trespassed. No one watched with suspicion. Just water, trees, and the sound of truth echoing back from the stillness. As the sun rose over Eagle's Mirror Lake, a new peace settled across the water like a gentle blanket. The legal battles had quieted, the cameras had turned away, and Vanessa Lockridge's name no longer dominated headlines. For the first time in months, Reed Mather wasn't waking up to threats or legal notices, but to the sound of loons calling and wind stirring the trees outside his window. But it wasn't just about silence. It was about building something better. The Eagle's Mirror Conservancy had become more than an idea. It had become a movement. Volunteers now arrived daily, some driving for hours just to help restore the shoreline, plant native flowers, or mend the pier. Families brought children, teachers brought nature classes, veterans brought strength and quiet understanding. It wasn't just about preserving the lake. It was about healing the community. Reed and Miles worked side by side every day. They built wooden benches from old lumber. They added a new ramp for wheelchair access. They carved signs that read, "Leave it better than you found it," and posted them along the trail. One afternoon, as Reed repaired a damaged canoe rack, a group of high school students approached hesitantly. "You're the guy," one of them said, "the one who stood up to the HOA." Reed wiped sweat from his brow. "I guess I am." The boy hesitated. "We've been studying land rights in civics class. Our teacher showed us your story. Is it true you own the entire lake?" Reed paused. "I do, but I don't control it. That's a choice." The boy blinked. "What do you mean?" Reed smiled, setting down his hammer. "Owning land doesn't make you better, but sharing it, protecting it, that's what gives it meaning." The students stayed and helped finish the rack. Later, one of them asked if they could host a community poetry night by the water. Reed said yes without hesitation. Word spread again, but this time not in outrage, in celebration. A month later, more than 100 people gathered by the lake for music, stories, and laughter under lanterns strung between pine trees. A young girl read a poem about freedom and honesty. An elderly man spoke about how he'd fished with Elias Mather 60 years ago and never thought he'd see this place feel sacred again. Reed stood with Miles near the dock, watching children play at the shoreline where, just weeks earlier, guards in polo shirts once shouted fines. "This doesn't feel real," Miles said, his voice soft. "It's real," Reed answered, "because we built it, not with money, with truth." Just as they turned to head home, a woman approached, holding a toddler. She was young, no more than 30, with tired eyes and a cautious smile. "Mr. Mather?" she asked. "I just wanted to thank you. I live in Crestone. I didn't know what was really going on until your story came out. My husband and we paid so much for access to a lake that wasn't theirs to sell." "I'm sorry that happened to you," Reed said gently. The woman shook her head. "You don't understand. My son has autism. This place, it's the only place he doesn't scream. He watches the ripples for hours. You gave him that. You gave us that." She kissed her son's forehead and walked away before Reed could respond. He felt his throat tighten. Miles stood beside him, quiet. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The land had always been his. But now, its purpose was clear. It was never meant to be hoarded. It was meant to be shared, honored, and protected from the hands of those who would twist nature into leverage and turn community into control. Eagle's Mirror Lake was free again, and so was the man who had defended it. The day started with light rain, the kind that made the lake shimmer like liquid glass. Reed stood on the dock alone, barefoot, watching the sky ripple in the water below. It had been exactly 1 year since he received that first fine taped to his gate, a single piece of paper that had tried to erase 100 years of family legacy. He remembered the feeling, the quiet humiliation, the disbelief. And now, looking out at the lake, everything felt impossibly far from that moment. Behind him, the Conservancy grounds buzzed with life. Dozens of volunteers had shown up to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the Eagles Mirror Conservancy. There were food trucks, a live folk band on a makeshift wooden stage, and tents offering nature walks, bird-watching tours, and even boat painting for kids. The pier now stretched wide enough to host stargazing events. Along the banks, children skipped stones, elders fished peacefully, and teens took selfies by the massive carved wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Eagles Mirror Lake, protected by legacy, open by choice." Miles had taken charge of setting up the event, and Reed couldn't have been prouder. His son had grown into something stronger, not bitter, not angry, but brave in a quiet, steady way. He moved through the crowd now, smiling, shaking hands, introducing new guests like he'd been born for it. Then something happened that Reed didn't expect. May Whitaker stepped onto the small stage and tapped the mic. The crowd fell silent. "We're here today not just because someone fought back," she said, her voice clear, "but because he chose to do it without becoming the monster he was up against." Reed felt his chest tighten. He could have kept the lake to himself. He could have let it become a weapon. But instead, he made it a home for truth, for children, for those who were lied to, and for those who never had a place before. So today, on behalf of the town, the county, and the people whose lives were changed, I'd like to officially declare August 12th as Eagles Mirror Day. The crowd erupted in applause. Miles ran up and wrapped his arms around his father. Reed stood frozen, tears in his eyes, not from pride, but from something deeper: release. Later that afternoon, a father and daughter approached him. The little girl held something behind her back. "Are you Mr. Mather?" she asked. Reed smiled. "I am." She pulled a crayon drawing from behind her. It showed the lake, the dock, the trees, and a man with a beard standing beside a boy. At the top, it said in crooked handwriting, "Thank you for fighting for our lake." He knelt down, took the drawing, and said softly, "You're welcome, sweetheart." When the sun began to set and the crowd slowly dispersed, Reed stayed behind, sitting alone on the edge of the dock. The same dock they tried to call illegal. The same dock where he'd once stood, doubting everything. Now it was quiet, just him, the trees, and the water. A place that was once under siege had become a refuge again. And for the first time in his life, Reed Mather no longer felt like he was holding on to the lake. He felt like the lake was holding him. In the end, this story isn't just about a man reclaiming his land. It's about reclaiming dignity in the face of quiet tyranny. Reed Mather's journey is a testament to the power of persistence, legacy, and truth. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He unearthed the truth, stood his ground, and let integrity do the shouting. What makes the ending powerful is not just the downfall of the corrupt HOA, but the choice Reed made after winning to share, to turn private ownership into public healing. In a world where people are often bullied into silence by red tape and fine print, Reed's story reminds us that the strongest resistance comes not from rage, but from clarity, from knowing who you are, where you come from, and what is worth protecting. Justice wasn't served with revenge, it was served with restoration. And that's what makes it truly unforgettable.